Honestly, I wasn't planning on playing Infamous Second Son in 2026. The game came out in 2014. I had already heard about it 1,000 times. I saw people praising Delsin Row, the smoke, the neon, the concrete, and yet the game hadn't caught my attention. It stayed on that mental list of one day I'll get to it. Then this year, out of nowhere, I opened my library, saw the cover, and thought, why not now? What pulled me back was precisely the fact that it's old. In 2026, we live at an absurd pace of releases, updates, battle passes, live services. Suddenly I missed a single-player game that starts, has a beginning, middle, and end, and doesn't demand you log in every day. Second Son seemed like the kind of game that just wants to entertain you for a few hours without asking for anything in return. Another thing that got to me was a sort of twisted nostalgia. I remember watching trailers back in the PS4 era, people going crazy over the smoke powers, the ruined city of Seattle, and I was like, this looks like a movie. I never really played it back then. In 2026, with everything we've already seen in open worlds and superpowers, I was curious to see if that feeling would still hold up. Before starting, my expectations were very specific. I wanted to see if the combat was still satisfying, if the powers still gave that feeling of wow, I'm a walking disaster, and if Delsin's story still had weight. I wasn't expecting 2026 graphics, obviously. I was expecting personality, I was expecting that slightly rebellious, slightly messy way of telling a story that Sucker Punch used to do. I also had a genuine fear. Fear of finding the game too dated, of finding the QuickTime events annoying, of finding the karma system too simple by today's standards. In 2026, we get spoiled by complex systems, and I didn't want to go in skeptical, ruining the experience before it even started. But at the same time, I was excited to be surprised. There are old games you play today and think, wow, this aged poorly. There are others you play and think, why did I wait so long? I wanted to find out which of those groups Second Son fell into, and if it fell into the second, I knew I'd be talking about it for days. So I went in without heavy spoilers, without a guide, without expectations of a high review score, just with the desire to feel again what it was like to play a semi-anti-hero superhero in a ruined Seattle, with powers that feel like controlled chaos. And look, what came next hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. Right in the first few minutes of playing, I got a shock I wasn't expecting. This game is still pretty, really pretty in 2026. It's not that pretty for its time kind of thing. It's genuinely pretty in 2026. And that caught me completely off guard because I went in thinking I would have to overlook a lot of things. The lighting is the first thing that jumps out at you. There are simple scenes like standing on the street under that typical overcast Seattle sky, and the light hits the buildings, the puddles of water, the characters, and everything feels alive. It's no exaggeration to say that at times it looks like a much more recent game. And then comes the rain. Man, the rain in this game is absurd. It's not just an effect slapped on top, it interacts with the environment, creates reflections on the ground, and leaves everything with that melancholic shine. There are times you just stop and look, because the mood of the city completely changes. But what really sells all of this are the particles. When you start using your powers, that's when the game simply shines. Smoke dissolves in the air in a very natural way. Fragments scatter, and the effects have weight. It's not a generic explosion. Each power has a very clear visual identity. The neon power, for example, is a spectacle on its own. Those light trails, the bright glow, shots leaving lines in the air, everything is highly stylized. But at the same time, it fits perfectly into the game's world. You feel like it's not just a cool effect, it's part of Delsin's personality. And the smoke, seriously, the smoke in this game is still one of the coolest things visually. When you transform and go through vents or simply dissolve in the air, it feels fluid, organic. Even after so many years and so many games with more modern effects, this still holds up easily. The weirdest thing is realizing that while many newer games bet solely on heavy realism, Infamous Second Son blends realism with style in a way that has aged much better. In 2026, it doesn't look outdated, it looks well executed. And that was the first hour where I thought, maybe this game is much more special than I remembered. If the graphics already took me by surprise, the gameplay was the moment I truly thought, okay, this game isn't just pretty, it's still really satisfying to play. Because normally that's where older games start to stumble, and here, that wasn't the case. Delsin's movement is fluid in a way that still impresses. Climbing buildings, grinding through the environment, sprinting, and chaining a power right after, everything flows together really well. It doesn't have that stiff or clunky feel that some games from that era had. It's light, responsive, and above all, fast. And when you start using powers to move around, the game completely changes. Turning into smoke to cross through a vent, dashing across the map with neon. gaining height in seconds, that turns exploration into something fun on its own. You don't just walk to the objective, you practically play with the map. The combat has also aged much better than I expected. It's simple to understand, but it isn't shallow. You have options, you have rhythm, you have that balance between attacking, repositioning, and using the environment. It doesn't get repetitive as quickly as I imagined it would. And most importantly, each power actually changes the way you play. Smoke is more aggressive and direct, neon is fast and precise, concrete has a whole different weight to it. It's not just changing the color of your attacks, it changes the feel, it changes the strategy, it even changes how you approach enemies. There's a very satisfying thing here, which is the feedback. Every shot, every explosion, every ability, everything responds well. The visual and audio impact pairs perfectly with the controller in your hand. You feel like you're in control of the chaos, and that's essential for a superpower game. At the end of the day, what surprised me most is that the gameplay doesn't feel dated. It feels refined. In 2026, with so many more complex things out there, Second Son still manages to be fun without needing to overcomplicate things. And that, honestly, is rare. Man, it's wild to think that in 2026, we barely hear anyone talk about Infamous, Second Son, you know? When it released in 2014, this game was practically the flagship of the PS4. Everywhere you looked, there was Delsin Rowe blowing things up with neon hands, and people treated it as if it were the future of superheroes in video games. Today, if you bring up PlayStation exclusives, people will cite God of War, Bloodborne, Spider-Man, even Ghost of Tsushima, but Infamous? It feels like it became that cousin who vanished from the family and nobody remembers their name during Christmas lunch. And the worst, or best part, is that it didn't age poorly. Far from it. Replaying it now, you can see that Sucker Punch delivered a solid title. The power mechanics are still ridiculously satisfying, the recreation of Seattle is beautiful, and that karma system, while a bit black and white, still gives weight to your choices. So why does almost no one mention it today? I'm genuinely intrigued by this. It feels like the quality of the game wasn't enough to keep it alive in the collective memory, and that feels almost unfair to me. I think part of the problem is that the franchise simply stopped. There was no Infamous 4, no remaster to make noise, no spin-off in the PS5 generation. Sucker Punch went ahead and made Ghost of Tsushima, which is great, but ended up leaving the superhero universe behind. When a series doesn't get new attention for over a decade, the audience naturally moves on. The curious thing is that other hero games, like Insomniac's Spider-Man games, dominated the exact space Infamous used to occupy, but with a character everyone already knows. There's something that bugs me, I'll admit. Second Son was, in many ways, a game ahead of its time. It played with ideas of surveillance, state terrorism, identity and power, all wrapped in an alternative superhero aesthetic that fits Seattle's vibe really well. Replaying it today, some themes even resonate stronger than they did in 2014. But maybe the fact that it didn't have a Delsin Rowe with the cultural appeal of a Kratos or a Peter Parker hurt its longevity. PlayStation, in a way, also never really knew how to market this universe once the release hype died down. It's weird because I remember perfectly the feeling of flying between buildings for the first time, absorbing smoke, and feeling that controller truly respond. And at the same time, if I play this in front of someone younger today, there's a real chance they'll ask, "What game is this?" That gives me a strange, almost nostalgic feeling, like I'm holding onto a secret that should be public knowledge. It's a game that didn't deserve this silence, you know? It's not perfect, the story stumbles, some missions are repetitive, but the core experience is so unique that being forgotten feels like a mistake on our part, as players, for not keeping it alive. I keep wondering if this isn't a sign of how the industry consumes its own creations. We live in a cycle where only what's on sale, had a recent sequel, or got a $70 remake deserves attention. Infamous, Second Son fell right into the gap between generations. It's not old enough to be an untouchable PS2 classic, and it's not new enough to be part of the current hype. It got left floating, and the lack of a sequel was the final nail in the coffin. But I'm here to say, it exists, it's good, and it's absurdly underrated. If you have a PS4 or PS5 sitting there and you've never played it, or played it 10 years ago and forgot, give it a chance. Seriously. Go back to Seattle, feel the weight of being a bioterrorist or a hero, and tell me if it isn't strange that we left this game behind. I almost feel like I'm doing a public service just by reminding people it exists. Sometimes, the most interesting games aren't the ones everywhere, they're the ones we need to rescue from oblivion. And Infamous Second Son, with all its neon and smoke energy, is one of them. But there's one point that, the more I played, the more it bothered me. And it's almost unbelievable in 2026. Infamous, Second Son remains basically trapped on the PS4. A game of this caliber, with this potential, simply stood still in time in terms of accessibility. And that's strange, because Sony itself has already brought several exclusives to PC, made remasters, remakes, PS5 upgrades, and Second Son was left out of that conversation. There was no truly optimized version, no re-release to put it back on people's radar. In practice, this severely limits the game's reach. A lot of people playing on PC today never had the chance to try it. And even those with a PS5 end up not coming back, because there isn't that push from a new version with clearer improvements to make the game feel relevant again. And it's an even bigger waste when you realize how good the game still is. It's not a case of a game that was forgotten because it aged badly. On the contrary, it's still fun, beautiful, functional. It just wasn't reintroduced to the current audience. Imagine this game running with more modern enhancements, maybe better resolution, faster load times, some fine-tuning in its systems. It could easily gain a second life. And nowadays, we see several old games resurfacing precisely because of that. The most curious thing is that Infamous was once one of PlayStation's most important franchises, and Second Son, even with its flaws, was an absurd technical showcase at the time. Seeing it simply forgotten like this leaves a feeling of a missed opportunity. Playing it in 2026 leaves a bittersweet feeling. Because while you discover a game that is much better than you imagined, you also realize that many people will never play it. Not because they don't want to, but because it got stuck in a place the industry has already begun to leave behind. Despite its limitations, the game features a Seattle that is beautiful in its own way. The light drizzle, the gray sky being torn apart by those orange sunsets, the humidity in the air, it all builds a city that wraps around you. I stood in the middle of the street just staring at the horizon, and right from the start, I knew this was different. What really got to me is that this beauty isn't the hyper-realistic kind that disappears when you get close. No. Sucker Punch took the real identity of the Pacific Northwest, that melancholic mood, and created something that breathes. There is modernity, nature creeping in around the edges, bridges and skyscrapers reflecting wet light. I had never seen that before, so it wasn't nostalgia, it was pure impact. It's a city that feels alive because it has a mood, a personality. You simply want to stay there, walking through it. Now, if there's one thing I wasn't expecting when I started playing, it's how vertical this map is. It's not one of those open worlds that feel like a stretched carpet where you just run sideways and forward. Seattle here goes up, it has layers. I was at street level, then I jumped onto a roof. Then I saw an antenna. Then I noticed that higher building had a perfect balcony. It's an architecture that forces you to look up, and that's rare. Very rare. The sky here isn't just a backdrop. It's territory the game invites you to conquer. And then comes the part that blew my mind. The powers aren't just weapons. They are traversal tools, and the entire city was built specifically to embrace that. When I dropped through ventilation ducts with smoke, or shot a beam of neon while running up walls, or teleported in video particles between antennas, I wasn't using a disguised fast travel. I was reading the city for the first time. Seattle is like a pop-up book, where each power turns a new page, showing how that street, that alley, that skyscraper can be experienced in a completely different way. The game simply didn't let me get comfortable on the ground for too long, and that's intentional. I would see a glowing point up high, a power shard, a graffiti area, or simply a nice view, and the city pulled me upward. But it's not that annoying checklist exploration where the map floods with icons and you turn your brain off. It's genuine curiosity. I thought, can I reach that with neon without touching the ground? If I climb that roof, what will I see? And the reward was almost never just an item. It was the feeling that I had truly mastered that piece of Seattle. You know what impressed me most, it being my first time? We have open worlds in 2026 that are technically monumental, but treat you like a tourist. Here, I was a delinquent with superpowers, and Seattle was my private playground. The city didn't hold my hand. It gave me wings, literally in the case of some powers, and said, figure it out. There's no loading screen pulling you out of the experience. The mobility is the experience. And when I stopped to think about it, I was amazed. How did they get this fluidity so right over a decade ago and still teach lessons today? Seattle almost became a supporting character I couldn't forget. It has a way of staying in your memory, not as a generic backdrop, but as a place I actually felt under my feet, or under my hands, when I was scaling a wall at 100 miles an hour. When I turned it off, I felt that strange longing for a city that technically doesn't even exist. But inside the game, it breathes. And maybe that's what makes Second Son so insanely good. I arrived in 2026, having never played it, expecting something outdated, and discovered that there still isn't much out there that lets you move, explore, and simply exist inside an open world with the same raw joy that this city gave me. Power Powers remain the main highlight of Infamous, Second Son even in 2026, and playing with them today is like remembering why this game was so special back at launch. Every ability Delsin absorbs isn't just a visual change, it's a complete shift in how you move, fight, and feel the pace of the game. Smoke is the first power you unlock, and even as the most basic one, it remains one of the most versatile. It gives you real urban mobility. You travel through vent pipes, glide between buildings, dash through fences and barriers, and use the dash to dodge gunfire mid-combat. It's a power that teaches you to look at the environment differently, always searching for cars, chimneys, and anything emitting smoke to recharge. In combat, it balances speed and power, featuring fast attacks and a sulfur bomb that freezes groups of enemies, perfect for creating space and moving on. Neon, on the other hand, is pure speed. When you activate this power, the city turns into a racetrack. You sprint along neon lights, run up walls at top speed, and slow down time while aiming, turning every firefight into a movie scene. It's the most fragile power defensively, but it's unmatched when you want to escape a tough situation or simply cross the map in seconds. Plus, the energy blasts are precise, and the heavy attack, the phosphor beam, deals massive damage to vehicles and helicopters, making it essential in certain missions. Video power brings a strategic layer no other power has: invisibility. With it, you can vanish from enemy sight, perform stealth takedowns, and summon a video angel or demon to fight for you. The mobility is interesting too, featuring a super jump similar to Neon's, and a glider that lets you cross large distances cinematically. In direct combat, it works almost like a machine gun. You hold the button to fire a stream of projectiles that mows down standard enemies, while the heavy attack is slow but devastating against large armored targets. Concrete is the heaviest, most brutal power in the game, and that shows in both mobility and combat. Running with it, you literally knock down everything in your path, giving you an absurd sense of strength, though it also makes you slower and more visible. In the air, it's the only power that lets you truly fly with multiple thrusters to dominate the Seattle sky. On the ground, your punches hit like stone sledgehammers, capable of breaking shields and dealing massive close-range damage, though it forces you into the chaos, which can be dangerous if you aren't prepared. What makes these powers work so well together is the freedom to switch between them at any time. You can start a mission invisible with video, sprint away with neon, scale a building with smoke, and finish by wrecking everything with concrete. This flexibility gives each play session a different personality depending on your playstyle. Even in 2026, with so many open-world games around, Second Son stands out by making you feel like you're commanding something truly unique and powerful. Powers aren't just tools. They are the soul of the game. They turn Seattle into a living playground where every street, building, and enemy can be approached in multiple ways. That's why Infamous Second Son remains so insanely good even after all these years, because no other game has managed to make you feel so free and powerful at the same time. Look, I need to be honest with you, not everything in Second Son aged like fine wine. There are things here that, when you play in 2026, make you pause for a second. You're enjoying the city, feeling the powers, and suddenly the game throws you into a side mission that's basically go to the green marker, fight 3 enemies, press a button, come back. It's that district liberation format we saw in practically every open world in the 2010s. And today, after so many games, that repetition stands out. Speaking of those activities, Sucker Punch didn't stray far from the formula of that era. You have checkpoints to destroy, drones to shoot down, DUP agents to drive out. At first, it's satisfying because you use powers creatively, but by the 3rd or 4th district doing the same thing with minimal variation, you feel it was made to pad out the runtime. It's not offensively bad, but it's the kind of repetition modern games have learned to disguise better or vary more. Enemy AI is another element that screams 2014. You notice they function mostly like target dummies with pre-programmed routes. They spot you, shoot, try to hide behind the same wall, and sometimes make choices that, well, make you feel sorry for them. I remember standing on a roof throwing smoke everywhere, and a guy just stood there staring into space while his buddy got punched right next to him. It doesn't ruin the game because the fun comes from feeling powerful, but if you expect tactical combat or smart enemy reactions, this isn't it. It has those typical open-world mechanics of the era we've grown tired of. You have to destroy towers, or checkpoints in this case, to reveal the map. You have to collect hundreds of shards to upgrade your powers. The graffiti spots are visually cool, but mechanically they're just press the triggers and rhythm. It's an activity checklist that was standard back then, and in 2026, when you play Elden Ring or Spider-Man 2 offering more freedom in map interaction, this rigid structure shows its age. The karma system, with binary good or evil choices, also feels the weight of the years. It's not bad, but it's very black and white. You pick a path, and practically all missions and dialogue shifts happen mostly at the end, with the gameplay forcing you to pick a side early and stick with it. Today, we've seen games handle consequences more organically, whereas here, you can tell it was a mechanical system before a narrative one. But you know what I realized? These marks of time don't ruin the experience, because the core game, moving around, exploring, feeling the powers, is strong enough to carry these weaker parts. It's like rewatching a 90s action movie. You know the plot has plot holes and simple logic, but the energy is so good you look past it. In 2026, Second Son is exactly that. You notice the wrinkles, but the soul is still there. In the end, it's fair to talk about these things because they show why the game is still insanely good. It's a faithful product of its era, complete with the habits and tropes of last-gen open worlds, yet it accomplishes things many current games fail to replicate. Repetitive missions, simple AI, activity checklists, all of it aged, but it aged in a way that makes you appreciate what survived intact even more. And man, when the game gives you wings again after a dull mission, you quickly forget why you complained. It's impossible to talk about Infamous Second Son in 2026 without touching on that sore spot every fan feels: Sony's almost total abandonment of the series. For years, Infamous was one of PlayStation's strongest brands, but after Second Son and First Light, the franchise simply vanished from the spotlight, as if placed on a forgotten shelf. The shift began when Sucker Punch, the studio behind the series, decided to try something new. After releasing 5 Infamous-related games in just 5 years, the team was clearly tired of the formula and wanted to explore a fresh concept. In interviews, they made it clear they wanted to build a completely different game, requiring a new identity and research. That's how Ghost of Tsushima was born, a project that consumed the studio's full focus for the following years. The massive success of Ghost of Tsushima consolidated this shift. The game sold over 13 million copies, far surpassing Second Son's performance, which hovered around 5 million. For Sony, the math is simple. If a studio delivers a global hit with a new IP, it makes more sense to invest in that than return to a series that showed signs of fatigue. Ghost of Tsushima became the priority, with Ghost of Yotei actively in development as a direct sequel. Meanwhile, Infamous remained in limbo. No new games, no remasters, no announcements. In 2025, when director Nate Fox was asked why the series never received a re-release, his answer was direct: lack of time. Sucker Punch works on one project at a time, and their full focus was on finishing Ghost of Yotei. He mentioned he would love to return to Infamous someday, but the reality is the studio is completely committed to the Samurai universe. What hurts most is that Infamous never got an official conclusion. The story was left open, fans keep asking for more, and theories about a return persist to this day. Yet Sony has never clearly addressed the future of the franchise, and Sucker Punch seems content leaving the topic aside. It's as if the series was sacrificed for Ghost of Tsushima's success. Despite this neglect, Infamous Second Son remains a game worth playing in 2026. Its mechanics, freedom, and soundtrack can still hook anyone for hours. Maybe one day Sony will realize there is still gold buried in this franchise. Until then, fans will keep playing, remembering, and hoping that Seattle might one day shine again with Delson's powers. That leads to the most curious part of all this. Playing Infamous Second Son in 2026 is a strange experience. Not strange in a bad way, but strange because it doesn't make much sense for this game to be where it is today. When you combine everything, graphics that still impress, fluid gameplay, fun powers, it clearly isn't an outdated game. It doesn't look like a title that should be forgotten on a digital shelf without much highlight. Yet, that's exactly what happened. A strong PlayStation exclusive that helped showcase the PS4's potential early on simply received no continuation. No direct sequel, no grand return, no effort to keep the franchise alive. What's stranger is the lack of a proper re-release. No robust remaster, no PC port, nothing to introduce the game to a new audience. In an era where so many old games get a second life, Second Son stood still. This creates a unique feeling. You're playing something with the quality to be relevant today, but the industry kind of left it behind. Not for a lack of merit, but perhaps due to priorities, timing, or simple lack of interest. That's where the bizarre nature of this game lies in 2026. It's too good to be forgotten, too pretty to be ignored, and too fun not to have been reused in some way. It feels like a misstep. Playing Infamous Second Son today feels like discovering a great game stuck in the past for no clear reason. The takeaway is simple. If this game were re-released the right way, it would effortlessly win over a new generation.